without further ado, I am Bob Bounds. I will be your MC for this evening, filling in for the admirably capable Laban, who actually made it on time, much to my surprise. But he's eating, so yeah. He was off doing his real job today. So anyway, with that, I say thank you again for coming down. I'm going to introduce you to Yuri, who is a RPI professor of microbiologist in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department, also in the Biology Department, the joint department over there. He's going to talk to you about all things connected. Thank you.
All right.
There you go.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, it is really my pleasure to be here. I want to talk with you tonight. About 3 years ago or so, my friend Fritjof Capper and I had the opportunity to celebrate Yuri Gagarin's 50th anniversary going into space. And we were out at the Griffith Observatory, and we had just a fantastic time, and where we started discussing the philosophy behind an area of science that I've been part of called electromicrobiology. So during that time, when we were actually, so this thing is running, I had already had this timed and practiced heavily. So about 600 years before Christ, we had this Greek philosopher, Thales, who rubbed a rod of amber with a piece of cloth, and he observed this invisible force that he called electron, the Greek word for amber. And in fact, after that time, 2,000 years later, there was like a period of 250 years where electricity and the concept of electricity really took off and really had a fundamental transformation on our planet. Now, so there is this, yeah, I know, my timing in my brain is better than... Oh, no, it's good. So look, we have fundamentally transformed this planet. We have made something remarkable. From outer space, we can actually see the impact of this electricity that we have now applied to our planet. The components, the processes, parts of it, when you look at it in finer detail, at higher magnification, you start to see these little features of being able to distribute power that was generated from things like, hopefully, solar, wind, hydro, but unfortunately also from fossilized carbon as an energy source, which our species is based, into this phenomenal response where we can see a transformation of our planet. Now, look, some of these systems are not that great. I mean, like this is, it's really remarkable that something like this works. Most of that's communication. There's a couple of power lines up on top. But, it does work and it does function. And I have hope for our species. And you know why? Because these systems actually resemble a lot of the things that we see in some of the oldest life forms on the planet. This is a scanning electron micrograph of a bacterial community that lives inside of our mouths. The little connections that you see there are not just resemble the electrical connections that we see on our planet, but are actually functionally moving electrons around for the distribution of energy, distribution through these electrical infrastructure, and also we think might be an advanced form of communication, electrical communication in the oldest life forms on the planet. Those two phenomena, the power distribution and communication, are two essential components of true sustainability. Now look, we were challenged early on about how do we actually demonstrate that those connections that we see are electrically conductive. And my friend and colleague Mo El-Najjar from the University of Southern California applied established methodology that are used for looking at the electronics of small electronic structures, and applied that to these little biological filaments. And what we see are connections between microorganisms, and then you can, with these little leads now in place in a closed circuit, can apply voltage and measure all of the current that flows between that little filament that you see in that image. So these are not just like organisms like of some special type. Apparently, these little electrical connections that we see are distributed broadly in the microbial world. In fact, the two organisms that you see here, that little round one on the bottom and that little sausage-shaped one, they're in two different domains of life. One is a bacterium, one is archaea. We are part of the eukaryotes. We have more in common with that little round one than that round one has with the sausage-shaped one, and yet they are electrically coupled. These organisms that you see here have actually developed the capacity not only to exchange electrons and energy through these electrical conductors that we call bacterial nanowires, but can drive those electrons down to the surface that lies beneath them. There's a little electrode in there, and we can generate electricity in devices that we call microbial fuel cells. What you see here is an image taken by a friend of mine that shows the diversity of these types of connections. She calls these the electrical communication organisms. And so you can see that there's almost like some sort of source, like some sort of strategy among these organisms. Look, it's not all good, right? I mean, this biofilm that I showed you earlier is actually a pathogenic biofilm that occupies people that have taken bisphosphonates for bone disorders, bone density disorders. This is called osteonecrosis of the jaw. These organisms are dissolving away that woman's upper jawbone as a corrosion mechanism that is understandable through electrochemistry, and we can talk about that later on. It's not just, these organisms are not just confined to certain groups or pathogenic systems. Down in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, where I come from, we see this type of thing a lot up here, and actually you see it in New York State too, acid mine drainage. And if you look at that acid mine drainage and start to look at it at higher magnifications, you start to see something phenomenal. The organisms that catalyze that oxidation of that iron 2 as an electron donor to oxygen as an electron acceptor encase themselves in these little minerals that you see here. And we found a way to actually dissolve those minerals away. In fact, we can coax those organisms to dissolve it away by pumping electrons to those iron minerals and dissolving the iron 3 by reducing it to iron 2, and it dissolves away. And what you see underneath are these little electrical connections that start to, suggest that this is not just some sort of strange phenomenon. This is almost neurobiological. Check out the little ganglia that you might see there. This is one of my favorite organisms. This is a cyanobacterium. This organism, about 2.5 billion years ago, learned how to take the energy of a photon to develop and activate a set of pigments to extract electrons out of water and then couple that with carbon dioxide and fix that into biomass and carbon fixation. And in that process make oxygen. Those little things that you saw there are electrical conductors that we've coaxed to touch down onto an electrode surface and make electricity with photons and water as their energy and electron sources. The philosophy. These things are not just little conductors. They're semiconductors. They act as transistors. The image on the right you see here really are reminiscent of the little conductors that we see in those little transistor logic boards that you see. The other thing is the transmission rate of electrons along those biological fibers are 3 orders of magnitude, 1,000 times faster than the transmission of energy or information in our own neurons. We have lots to learn. All we got to do is bring our minds together and really understand what the oldest life forms on the planet have adopted and embrace that knowledge and develop truly sustainable systems. And I really want to thank you for the really quick 6.4 minutes that we just had. It was awesome. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thank you.
That is tough.
It's hard, isn't it? I'm glad I'm the MC. I don't have a time limit. I just have to deal with the Rotten Tomatoes. You guys are brave. So next is a rather interesting topic entitled "The Lincoln's Ghost Train." Beth Bornick, who is a maker, an amateur historian, a serious researcher, and claims this has nothing to do with anything that she does during the day, but this is what she's going to talk about. So with that, I'm going to start that, and there you go.
All right. I wonder if you know the story of the phantom funeral train that brings President Lincoln's body up the Hudson River Railroad every year in the spring. You say you don't believe in ghosts, but didn't you hear about the spirit photographer? His picture showed the ghost of President Lincoln standing behind his widow, clear as day when she sat for her portrait. Now, if ever a man had strong enough spirit to escape the grave, it was our President Lincoln. We saw his train come through Greenbush twice. He surely had a long journey to reach Washington from Springfield, Illinois, when he was elected back in '61. And it seemed like he had to stop and speak in every single city along the way. He even stopped in a little town up by Chautauqua to thank a little girl named Gracie, who wrote to him and told him that he would look better with a beard. So everybody in Albany was surprised to see him arrive wearing whiskers, looking so different from the clean-shaven likenesses that we'd seen in the broadsides they printed for the elections. Now, in those days, the passengers got off the train in Albany and took the ferry across the river and got on another train in Greenbush. The money had been raised for a bridge in Albany, but those hotel men made such a protest, saying that they'd lose all their business, so it still hadn't been made yet. And sure enough, this was February, and the river was full of ice, and there was no ferry. So the Lincoln's train went up north to cross the bridge here at Troy, you know, the one that burned the year after and half the city with it. Of course, Mr. Lincoln was greeted much more warmly here in Troy, too, than he was in Albany, as we were more sympathetic to his politics. But our two brand new engines from the Locomotive Works in Schenectady started their service for that trip to take the Lincolns back down to New York City. The engine named Union ran down to Poughkeepsie, and the one named Constitution took him from Poughkeepsie on to New York City. Such patriotic names. Huh? Well, these same fine engines, sadly, pulled the president's car back up when his funeral train came back up the line in 1865. After the assassination, the government decided his body would return to Illinois for burial by the same route that his inaugural train took through the states. Every railroad used their own engines, of course. They were all decorated in black crepe and flags, sometimes with pictures. All along the way, the crowds gathered on the tracks, and they decorated the stations and the overpasses, and the progress of the train was very slow through the crowds. The president's casket was carried in a specially made funeral car, and so was the body of little Willie Lincoln, and he had died of typhoid a few years before, and they were bringing him home to be buried with his father. From Pennsylvania onward, each state's governor rode through their own state on the funeral train. There was to be a big ceremony in New York, and the funeral car came across the Hudson River by ferry boat, if you can believe that. President Lincoln's casket was moved to a funeral carriage that crossed over on one ferry, and the railroad car with Willie's casket still on board crossed over at another. Then there was a very grand parade before the ceremonies were held in the old New York City Hall. And when that funeral was over and it was time to leave for the Hudson River Station, the procession following the casket numbered 60,000 people, and they marched past the railroad station for many hours. And when the train left New York, the locomotive Constitution was all decorated with mourning badges and black ribbons. And she went 10 minutes ahead as the pilot train to make sure that the tracks were clear. Then the engine Union pulled the funeral train and 7 cars back up the Hudson River, and she was even more beautifully decorated with flags and funeral wreaths. And the train arrived in Greenbush late at night on April 25th, and the president's casket rested at the Deersteins Inn at the ferry landing before crossing to Albany for the ceremonies at the Capitol. They said there was still a line a mile long waiting to pay their respects when they had to close the door at the final day. The 6 white horses brought President Lincoln back to the station, and we thought that that was his last journey. But just a few years later, they wrote a story in the Albany Evening Journal about President Lincoln's ghostly funeral train. And I'll read it to you just as the night watchman wrote it, or told it to the railroad, or to the reporter. Regularly in the month of April, about midnight, the air on the track becomes very keen and cutting. On either side it is warm and still, and every watchman, when he feels this air, steps off the tracks and sits down to watch. Soon after, the pilot engine with long black streamers and a band with black instruments playing dirges and grinning skeletons sitting all around will pass up noiselessly, and the air grows very black. If it is moonlight, clouds always come over the moon, and the music seems to linger as if frozen with horror. A few minutes after, and the phantom train glides by. Flags and streamers hang about. The track ahead seems covered with a black carpet, and the wheels are draped with the same. The wind, if blowing, dies away at once, and over all the air a solemn hush, almost stifling, prevails. The coffin of the murdered Lincoln is seen lying in the center of a car, and all about it in the air and on the train behind are vast numbers of blue-coated men, some with coffins on their backs and others leaning upon them. It seems then that all the vast armies of men who died during the war are escorting the phantom train of the president. Everywhere on the road, the time of the watches and trains is found suddenly 5 to 8 minutes behind from the passage of the phantom train. And the watchman told the reporter, "I believe in spirits and ghosts. I know such things exist, and if you come back in April, I will convince you." Now, we all know that there's no such thing as ghosts, of course. Wouldn't you like to think it was true?
Neat. Was that the train tracks going into the Hudson, into the tunnel under the Berkshires?
I have no idea.
I never knew there was a ghost train. Next up is the ever popular Jackson Sang, who is just back from a internship with a venture capital firm. He is a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering at RPI, and he's going to talk about ghosts and angels of the venture capital industry.
Hi, hello everyone. Actually, I wanted to name it.
You can have that microphone or that microphone, up to you.
Yeah, that is fine, thanks. I wanted to name it The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because Libin said the theme today is ghost. So I think this works also the ghosts and angels of the VC industry. So, yeah. I can control the time? Maybe not. So this is the firm I worked with. It's called GGV Capital. It's a global VC firm. They're managing $2.2 billion US, and they just had another $6.2 US billion. And these two are the two general partners I worked closely with. They have investment in Alibaba, Pandora, Square, SoundCloud. So this is what I call the VC sandwich because they have 3 layers. The top layer are the investors, or what we call the limited partners. They put in the money. They're usually pension funds, school endowments, or rich individuals. And the middle part are the VC firms. They are like general partners who have the right to write checks, and also associates and analysts. And the bottom part are the startups who got capital from the VC firm and also sell equities to the firm. And so we talked about general partners and the limited partners. The reason it's called a limited partner because it has limited liabilities, and they also have no say about what investment the firm got investment. And general partners, they have unlimited liabilities, and they also have something called a management fee. It's like 2% of the total fund. And if the fund makes money, most successful ones make money, they can have 20% carry fee, which means they return, for example, the $2.2 billion US to the limited partners, and whatever left, they take to 20%. And this is the almighty John Doerr, arguably the king of Silicon Valley. He's the senior partner of KPCB. So we said there's a ghost theme. So what haunts those general partners? So if they made a bad investment, that will go back haunt them when they go out to raise another round of fund. For example, he was too long on the clean energy. KP invested in Cylindra, and now media and all the investors are questioning their judgment. And interestingly, there are VC firms actually named themselves Ghost. So There are Gray Ghost Ventures. Funny thing is the acronym is also GGV, but that's not the firm I worked with. Their goal is to solve the poverty problem globally, which is a noble goal. And the other one is called Ghost Group. Their goal is not that noble. What they do is they leverage the new marijuana rules, and they invest heavily in those marijuana companies. So we talked about the ghost haunting the general partners, but for entrepreneurs, if they make some bad decisions, those like bad financing decisions, they will go back haunt them as well. This is Jim Clark. He's founder of both Silicon Graphics and Netscape, which is the first web browser. And because when he founded Silicon Graphic, he sold his company too cheaply, and it's demotivated the team. And because he had so little stake in the company, later on, he had some in-run with another like high executive, which was hired by him actually, similar to Steve Jobs, and he was like so fed up, so he quit Silicon Graphics. But soon he found a way to revenge, because he also founded Netscape, and the VC partner who persuaded him to sell the company cheap asked him to let him in, and he backed Jim Clark, said, if you don't let me in, my partner is going to kill me, my senior partner is going to kill me. And 1 week later, Jim told him to get loose, because Jim didn't like him. And 1 week later, he killed himself. But usually, VCs are like, there's not like deaths or killing people involved in the VC industry, and they usually kill entrepreneurs if they think they can get away with it. But sometimes there are like bold VCs have them bold goals. He wants to kill death. He said, your mind is software, program it. Your body is a shell, change it. Death is a disease, kill it. Extinction is approach and fight it. By the way, this is Peter Thiel, who's one of the PayPal mafia. But most of the time, the ghost of the VC industry is what I mean. It is sometimes when you read the news, it's not obvious that it is the VC firms that make things happening. For example, you know the guy on the left who is Sergey Brin, and someone in the middle is Amanda, and the right-hand side guy is Hugo, who's a senior VP in Google. And Hugo and Amanda was a boyfriend and girlfriend, and you can imagine like who else could steal a senior VP's girlfriend away? Definitely Sergey Brin, right? So Hugo was not happy, and he was thinking of leaving Google, and now he's working with Lei Jun, who's the company's name is Xiaomi. If you know it, it's the super cloner of Apple in China. A hugely successful mobile phone business, and he's now a VP in that company. And the reason for that probably is not quite obvious, but it has something to do with the gentleman I introduced from our firm, Hans. So he worked he studied in MIT as well, and these two guys, they are alumni, and they knew each other while they were both at MIT. So Hans knew that Hugo was not happy with Sergey, and he's thinking of leaving Google. So he approached Hugo and said, because he also invested in Xiaomi, that company, and he wanted to recruit Hugo. And Hugo wanted to observe how well Xiaomi does. And after a couple of months, Hugo thought the company is promising, and he liked the entrepreneur. So he took the leap. And this is another story. This gentleman's name is Steve Musherall. He is a RPI alum. He was the CTO of a company called Tudo, which is the Chinese YouTube, which is even 1 year earlier than YouTube founded. And like the right hand upper corner side was the picture when he was young. And in 2012, Trudeau and another company, they merged. And the reason for that, you probably think this is company strategy. But again, it's not. It's because our firm, GGV Capital, they wanted to exit. And one way to exit is IPO, and another way is to get merged or acquired by another firm. And as you can see, 2012, March 2012, as soon as they announced the merger's decision, the stock price of Trudeau just went up to the peak, and all those limited partners, they're happy. They got their money back. So we have VCs. They are a special kind of VC. That's called super angels. They're not actually VC. The difference is angels, they invest their own money, and VC, they have limited partners. They invest someone else's money. And for those super angels, they started early and they are doing quite well. They invest usually in the seed round, which is when you just have the idea and you're trying to make a product. So this guy is the godfather of angel investing, Ron Conway. He has invested in Facebook, Google, Twitter, all kinds of successful companies. And the way he invested in Google is also interesting. So he knew the professor who was the also angel investor of Google, and he heard about Google. He told that guy, okay, I have to get introduced to these two founders. The Sergey Brin and Larry Page was like, okay, if you do want to invest, you have to introduce us to Sequoia, because Ron Conway he's the most connected people in Silicon Valley. I can say that. So he definitely are able to introduce them to Sequoia, which is also another successful VC firm out there. And that's how he bought his ticket into Google. So there are other kinds of angels. This is the Qubit. So love angels. This is a story about myself. So sadly for Hugo, whose girlfriend was stolen by Sergey. So I met my girlfriend while I was interning at the GGV Capital. So this is the lady. These two are the same lady. I didn't have like two girlfriends at the same time. So our parents had a common friend. So our parents introduced us to each other. But because the internship was too intense, we didn't have much time to hang out. But when she is a Columbia University master's student. So when we both came back to the U.S., we fell deeply in love, and that's what we did. We on one evening and on one weekend. So I said, "How about we got married?" And she said yes. So we bought a ticket to Las Vegas, and the next day we were married. Thanks. And we did a one-day honeymoon trip to the Antelope Canyon, and that's it. So, but that's not the best part. The best part is our parents don't know yet. And we're gonna go back this Christmas time, and we're gonna tell them the story. So, because they know that we eventually are going to get married, but they don't expect it to happen so quickly. We got married, I think, 66 days after we first met. So, yeah, that's my story, the ghosts and angels of the VC industry. Thank you very much.
So you know this is being streamed to the internet. So let's hope your parents aren't watching. With that, I would like to introduce Blaise Hartley, who is our secretary of the Tech Valley Center of Gravity, who is a synergetic technologist. And you can pester him afterwards and try and figure out what that set of exciting buzzwords means. But he is talking about the ghost in the machine is you. Him, not me. You.
And you.
When
When does this start?
I think you're gonna have to manually advance.
I have to
it,
manage. Oh, how would I, okay.
Just in space.
Okay, well, now that I'm not ready. So I'm going to start by talking about emergence, which many of you probably understand, but stick with me because this gets complex really fast. We see emergence in nature, simple sets of rules that define massively complex structures. Like, for example, snowflakes. Simple set of rules about the angles that molecules can attach to each other produce massive, wait a minute, I ran out of time. Like I said, not ready. It's not, Bob, it's not. Space. It's a Mac. Okay, but we see emergence in biological systems as well. We see it in insects, we see it in birds, we see it in fish. Schooling and flocking and swarming. We see them, insects, building massive things and staying in physical structures with respect to each other based on simple rules. Flocking has been simulated using nothing more than move in the same direction as your neighbors, remain close to your neighbors, and avoid colliding with your neighbors. And suddenly you get schools of fish and flocks of birds and insects that stay together in social groups. Okay, sorry, I got to do this manually. But we also see emergence in really esoteric things like the human brain. fMRI studies have shown that chunks of the human brain operate entirely independently of each other. They do different things. They work differently from each other, and somehow those chunks all become us. They show us the illusion of a singular sentience, of a singular intelligence, but in fact they're just separate things doing their own thing. Which brings us to, where does that take us? What does that make us? Intelligence, it's a soft definition. We don't really know what intelligence is yet, which means that we don't really know whether or not we can build one, whether or not we can simulate one, what they really mean. A sense of self, for example, may or may not be required for intelligence. One of the things that we saw in the movie Terminator was that he actually picked his stuff off a menu to do things, which is a very realistic way of building an artificial intelligence. This isn't necessarily sentient. It just looks at some inputs and decides on an output based on some simple rules. Something that I've been working with for a couple of decades is something called filter logic, which is how in industry you build a lot of complex artificially intelligent systems that have to make a number of decisions all the time, and they have to do it based on simple rules. And as you see in this diagram, now it's going automatically. Is that you? All right. So the simple rules for this set you might see are don't make the same decision twice. You see one of them disappears on top. Block by the source, in this case color, because we don't have any other way to show it. So use the same color you did last time. And a third one would be choose the least expensive option of the remaining. So out of 16 options, we get down to one in a very short time. If we plug the outputs of that functional unit into itself, we get memory, we get feedback, we get a state machine, which allows it to store what it did before and become what it will be in the future. If we take multiple units, we can build something called a functional group. And that functional group will actually produce something that we might consider intelligence. It makes decisions we can't really predict without thinking them through at great length, and it does it automatically. But the way it doesn't produce necessarily what we would call intelligence. It's a high-order decision-making capability, but we don't have to worry about a global takeover. And the idea is these systems can be built to do almost what an intelligence does, and maybe do what an intelligence does. And that's the question. If we stack enough of them together, do we have to worry about that emergence coming back? If we stack a bunch of them together and plug all their inputs and outputs together,
will they, in fact, at some point become something that looks like intelligence? If it acts like an intelligence and it does things that we can't really predict easily, maybe it is an intelligence. These guys are Alan Turing and Alonzo Church. Turing you might recognize if you're into computers. But the two of them got together. Alonzo Church was Alan Turing's advisor when he was in school, Alan Turing being the inventor of the modern computer. But their principle, the Turing-Church principle, says that any processing system can be simulated on any other processing system. And that plugs into what we were talking about before, because when you think about the human brain, maybe it can be computed. Maybe everything that we are, that we understand, is actually just a program, is something that we can make or at least copy. Maybe we can't make it from scratch yet, but the idea still remains that the fMRI testing, oh crap. Okay, so maybe some brains are going to be easier to simulate than others. We've simulated ants and insects already that act like the real thing. In 2007, IBM Research Lab came up with a virtual mouse that actually simulated accurately the behavior of a mouse, just in a large computer. So maybe Homer is just around the corner. He is maybe what we can, oh, never mind. Yes, so if in fact the brain is a computer, then we have to talk about these dangers of AI. Will they take over? But we also have to think there are greater implications, because forget about making intelligence. What about us? What does this say about us as an intelligence? Forget the machines taking over. What if intelligent people took over? We've got a lot to think about there. There are a lot of implications. And now it's going slower than I thought. This is weird. Okay, so one of the possibilities is direct brain programming. We've seen it suggested in fiction for years. The Manchurian Candidate, whatever. We can implant programming. It's not necessarily always sinister. But it also gives us the possibility that our memories, our knowledge, are something, things we can upload and download. And as Keanu pointed out, he knows Kung Fu. But he didn't before. Or there's the possibility that our brain can be taught not to understand an implant, but to include an implant as one of its functional groups, as something that we don't think about or connect to, but as something that's a part of our personality, our sentience itself. It's just a matter of reprogramming the brain to include that implant as a part of us. So if we can process ourselves, we could have expansion slots. And that's a really huge implication. That takes us to a whole new level. It also opens up the possibility that an existing human mind can be simulated, just like NASA simulates the weather. It's not about, making an AI from scratch maybe, but what if what woke up was your friend Bob? Somebody copied him and stuck him in a box. Would he be dangerous compared to that homegrown AI that may or may not have any controls on it? Okay, we're ready. Sorry, I'm not good at this. If we combine the concept of simulation with these expansion slots, you could carry around other identities in your brain. We talk about that as multiple personality disorder now, but think about it. You could carry an expert for anything and everything. You could carry, oh, yeah. Hey, this one's broken. That's supposed to have.
That was an accident.
Okay. You could have expert advisors that are with you 24/7, accessible whenever you want. They could be included as a part of your own personality or separate personalities that monitor what's going on around you and make suggestions as you go. And this one is screwed up. That's supposed to have Homer's brain at the top and an arrow that shows an equality between him and Albert here. I don't know what happened there. But it wasn't like that when I sent it to him. However, what this means is that everybody can think like everybody else. And we're not talking about simulating other people. We're saying without technology, if we are computable, that means every one of us can think the way every other one of us does. A guy with an IQ of 60 can do quantum physics. It might take him longer. He might have a slower processor. But he can do everything that every other human being can do. So forget computers, forget AI. This is a big implication. It means that all of us have the potential to be anything and do anything, however we want. And that's my son. I didn't have enough for the 20th slide. So I put a picture up here because I'm not the kind of guy that carries pictures in his wallet. But he's awesome. But also, he's not a person yet, but he will be soon. And we may very soon understand what that actually means. And that's pretty cool to me. That's all I got. And sorry about the screw up with the slide.
Sorry about that. My computer ate Homer's brain, which, yeah, small snack. Go! Something to that effect. So, that brings us to the great, wherever he is. Where is he? Where did he go? The amazing. There he is. The lovely, the talented, the redheaded Anasha Cummings, who is an initiator of Transition Troy, from which Solarise Troy erupted. And we'd like to thank him very much for his last-minute presentation about, where did it go? Somebody ate his presentation.
Okay, don't blame them, because it's about chocolate.
Yeah, it is about chocolate, yeah.
It's about chocolate, and it's about climate change.
I can get it. There you go. Oh, that's right. There you go.
Yes, it's about chocolate and climate change. My name is Anasha. I'm here to talk to you about chocolate and climate change. The chocolate is a little bit of just an intro because today is International Chocolate Day, according to Google anyway. But also because I wanted to give you chocolate, and it does actually fit because chocolate, like many of the things that make our world so wonderful, is under threat from climate change as crops in West Africa are failing. Similar to chocolate, things all over the world are breaking. Our food systems, our whole countries flooding, going underwater, like the Maldives, and droughts that threaten the very blood of our civilization. This is really a global challenge, obviously. I think most people know that at this point. There are actual effects happening all over the world at this point. This is a massive global threat, and it's a threat that we need to address globally. People are being hurt, storms, fires, all of that. Climates are climates are changing. Poland is under attack, and we need to think about how we address a massive global challenge of this nature as a group. And so how do you do that? You do that locally, right? You do that as local projects. These are some projects that I've been involved with, things like Transition Troy, Solarise Troy, that are looking to make changes at the local level, building a sharing economy through things like the center of gravity that can make our world more efficient. And it's working really well. Things like Solarise and other initiatives are dramatically increasing the amount of solar that's happening in Rensselaer County. This is the last couple years of data of residential solar from BEV. And it's impressive, right? I mean, this is a curve that's really exciting. Through NYSERDA, it's okay. But it's not enough. It's not enough, because when you look at Troy is using 300,000 megawatts of electricity, megawatt hours of electricity every year. It's using 14.7 million therms of natural gas. It's using 7 million gallons of gasoline. That's a lot. And how do you address a thing like that? You address it with scale. You address it in the way we addressed it in the 1940s. You mobilize. You mobilize at a scale never seen before since World War II. And it's something that we've done before in that sense, in terms of really reallocating our nation's resources towards addressing a challenge like this. Is everyone doing what they can do? Are we saving water? Planting victory gardens. Troy had amazing numbers of victory gardens back in the 40s. Buying war bonds funded by the people. Everyone was submitting, paying 10% of their income to fund the war effort. And it really transformed our entire national economy. Our entire industrial capability was transformed over the course of just a few years, which is inspiring to me when we look at a global threat to say, this is something that's been done before. Detroit basically said, we're not going to be building cars for a couple years. We're going to be building tanks, and we're going to be building planes, and we're going to be building out the industrial capability that we need to face down this global threat of Nazism. Now, obviously, this is a different kind of threat. This is a much more nebulous threat. This is not, it's not literally invading Poland, and it's not bombing us at Pearl Harbor. But it is just as massive an undertaking to look at how is it that we transform our industrial energy economy from the old industrial energy economy, one of fossil fuels, to one of the future, which will provide, hopefully, a really prosperous life going forward. Now, for the next few slides, I'm cheating a little bit, and I'm also stealing from Saul Griffith, the founder of Instructables, because I think he did a really good job, and this is really last minute. But so if you look at, currently the global civilization uses about 18 terawatts of energy for our food and energy systems. About 12 of that is coming from ancient sunlight. But when you look at what energy is available, there's actually a lot available from current sunlight. Way orders of magnitude more sunlight available than what we're currently pulling out of the ground in fossil sources. But it's not easy to get to because it's not concentrated. The concentrated fuels are much easier. And we were looking at, this is Saul's graphic of what it would take to get 2 new terawatts of solar photovoltaic. And it is 100 square meters of solar every second for the next 25 years developed. That's not a entrepreneurial undertaking. That is a massive retooling of our industrial economy undertaking. That is an undertaking that needs to be done by taking the amazing capacity that we've built and using it to reinvent our civilization just as we did in the 1940s. In Troy, for example, we could take a solar manufacturing facility. If we were to produce roughly 50 megawatts of solar every year, which is pretty reasonable for a solar facility, did that for 5 years, we could be neutral in 5 years. And more nationally, it's about connecting with a national movement of people to build the political will for that, an international movement to build the political will for that scale of transformation of our industrial infrastructure. There's a group called the Climate Mobilization, which I met a few months ago, but it's a topic I've been thinking about a lot. And so they're starting to build this motion towards political will for this scale change. This is some of the founders. I met them down at the 350 and et cetera climate rally in New York City. But it's a group of young people really asking, what is it really going to take to get there by, say 2025? How do we get to zero carbon by 2025? And the mechanism that they've chosen is essentially a pledge to mobilize. So people make a pledge, a personal pledge, to say, this is what's necessary. It's what science is saying is necessary that we do. And so I am going to, in my own life, mobilize against climate change. And I'm also going to work to encourage political leaders to do the same. So as you eat your chocolate, enjoy it. And enjoy it not just as a fleeting, a delicious thing we can have for now, but as a rallying cry to keep the dementors away, see, I made a joke and then I lost it. No. That's how you end a presentation, though. So keep those dementors away of climate change and a rallying cry to really do what's necessary in the future.
Thank you very much, Anasha. You can bring chocolate anytime, particularly self-sustaining chocolate. Awesome stuff. So, with that, yes, the actual beans in the bowl there. So, with that, I will say thank you all for coming. Enjoy. I think we still have plenty of food and beer. Michael Swack. Okay, Michael. I didn't get a presentation from Michael. Got it on a USB stick? Excellent. It wasn't in amongst all the other ones I got. Sorry.
That's quite all right. Anticipate.
Yes, okay. Never mind, so don't go get beer and food and whatnot.
Way to paint me as the enemy.
Sorry, dude. Okay. Thank you very much, Michael,
You're
for
welcome.
taking the tail end. Without any further ado, here you go.
All right, thank you. I guess I'm also a fan of Windows, so Apple doesn't really like my font, but it says, "Fear of the family firm, how business success and the community impact can all be relative." And I'd like to thank the Tech Valley Center of Gravity in Laban Koblenz for the invitation. I guess Bob didn't get that, but that's all right. Thank you for moderating this great event. I'll be discussing the false specter that working in a family organization is a bad idea, and how I realized you shouldn't be fearful of being in a shadow and making a name for yourself and success for those around you. Although there aren't any stories at ZWAC Incorporated that I can share of ghosts looming around the company campus, I'm still especially excited to be here tonight for such a great theme during Halloween. I would have worn my Grim Reaper outfit, but were prohibited to wear company uniforms outside of work. So ZWAC Incorporated is what I like to call a small industrial conglomerate. Since 1970, we have been manufacturing metal and composite small parts, large machinery like the vertical winding machine seen here, as well as producing and distributing municipal road equipment. Our broad customer base includes companies and organizations like General Electric, Phillips Medical, Lockheed Martin, MIT, and International Paper, as well as over 300 municipal governments in New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Vermont. Selling snow and ice removal equipment year-round keeps the macabre dread of winter in my mind all the time. Spoiler, it's coming back. So when you think of a globally competitive American manufacturing enterprise, family businesses don't sound like it could be a successful participant, and New York State certainly doesn't sound like a successful location. However, our relationships with small to Fortune 500s and the precision and quality of our final products provides a perfect value argument in our offers with an aggressive bidding sector. We're not only competing against regional and national competitors, but also industrial outfits such as those in Latin America and China. Our products are also found nationally and throughout North America, South America, Europe, and Asia. The capabilities of our manufacturing space allow for assembly lines of small parts to order, or the fabrication of custom machinery in excess of 100 tons and anywhere in between. So this diversification into different areas hasn't really hurt us. Just like the satanic leaf-tailed gecko, we've happened to adapt to the often hospitable surrounding climate, as our nearly 45-year tenure has shown. So as a member of the third generation of the family business, started by my grandparents and now managed by my uncle and I've worked on and off there for the last 9 years, and I currently run the finance and operations side of it, which is now the largest private employer in southeastern Rensselaer County, and mostly from attrition, I guess, of others, but is still part of the growing 8% of our county's workforce associated with manufacturing. And if you actually look at it, Oak Mitsui, Atlantis Equipment Corporation, Taconic Plastics, all like us, are all firms far away from the Rensselaer, Troy, and Tech Park hustle and bustle, but we've quietly made New York Route 22 from Hoosick to Stephentown a successful manufacturing corridor in Rensselaer County. So I graduated from RPI and I got an MBA from Union, and I thought it was time to move on, but lo and behold, I took an offer I couldn't refuse. I build personal success in my own right, I improve a family reputation, and I contribute to a community, but no cannolis here, this family is completely legitimate. So what can make a family-run enterprise successful? The family business brings ideal household values into what becomes a successful corporate culture, including interpersonal relationships and a commitment to local community and civic causes. Communication in most capacities is easier, and the skill set of each individual is well known and broad-based among us, and we all do something that we don't want to do that somebody else does want to do, like taxes. So a committed management core of relatives is easier to impart transformational leadership on an organization as a whole, which enhances long-term motivation, morale, and job performance, and transactional leadership just brings you to the end of the shift. Family is for life, but in a normal business environment, you see regular employee turnover and those associated costs. Not so much with ZWAC Inc. Salary and benefits are relatively equal to our competitors, but we outperform average employee tenure is north of 10 years. We have a lot of employees that have been here over 30, and we even have a few multi-generational employee families among even our own ranks. So just like our family and corporation, our employees see the importance of civic engagement and charity, which makes sense. If you're going to manufacture highway equipment or fire and emergency apparatuses, you're going to likely become a member of that or serve on a school board, town board, or cemetery board, just as many of our family and employees elect to be or get elected. You're quick to learn that a neighbor that isn't a customer can still become a stakeholder in your personal and corporate success, at least the neighbors you're not scared of. So I'm not saying that everything in family business is peaches and cream. The personal business boundaries are no longer black and white, but very gray. I'm not sure if the White House phone rings at 3 a.m., but I often hear mine ring, and it's not Jacob Marley. Weekends, holidays, and vacations are often interrupted, cut short, and nothing is off limits when family is debating decisions on why they're right and you're wrong, including bringing up changing your diaper as a child. But being the 20-something MBA among us engineers takes a lot of arguments to get my point heard, and the perspective is hard to impart onto the rest of the group. But really, though, is that any different than the typical corporate boardroom? The thanks and gratitude you get back, though, from a boss that happens to be your uncle or grandfather, though, through hard work, means a lot more. Business success is not always assured, but it helps when you have a great team, as well as the courage and drive to improve in your business area and adapt where necessary, and nothing builds self-esteem like supportive relatives. Rensselaer County and the greater capital region provides quite a developing technology sector of businesses, organizations, schools, universities, with the right people, goods, and ideas, like the center of gravity that make us community-focused but globally competitive. So all I've been saying, if I've been saying anything, if you have or are looking to start a business, remember your team might just start with your kin, or at least those that are no longer trick-or-treaters. Regardless, I hope to have provided some insight or at least comic relief. Thanks for listening.